The job description for night shift telescope operator at the Black Rock Radio Observatory was mostly a lie. There were no telescopes, not in the way most people think of them. No eyepieces, no gleaming white tubes pointed at the sky. Our telescope was an array of 36 massive satellite dishes spread across a forgotten, dusty plateau in the Nevada high desert. And I didn't really operate them. The system was almost entirely automated, a silent symphony of servers and receivers managed by a team in Flagstaff, 300 miles away. My job, officially, was on-site monitoring. Unofficially, I was a glorified security guard for a ghost facility. For 6 months, it had been the easiest job I'd ever had. 12 hours a night, 7 nights on, 7 nights off. I'd drive my beat-up 4Runner up the 30-mile dirt access road, a trail so desolate it felt like the path to a lunar colony. Once there, I'd unlock the main control building, a squat, windowless concrete bunker filled with the low hum of servers, make a pot of coffee, and settle in. My only required duties were to log any system alerts, there were never any, and to do a physical perimeter check at the start and end of my shift. The rest of the time was my own. I read books, worked on a novel I'd never finish, and listened to the endless whispering wind. The silence out there is something you can't prepare for. It's not just an absence of noise, it's a physical presence. It presses in on you. After my first month, I took to leaving the control room's heavy steel door slightly ajar, just to hear something other than the monotonous drone of the cooling fans and the buzz of fluorescent lights. The high desert wind whistling through the narrow opening became my only companion. It was the third night of my shift, a Tuesday in late October. The air was colder than usual, carrying the first real bite of winter. A storm system was moving in from the Sierras, but out here it just meant the wind had more of an edge to it. I'd finished my initial perimeter check, the crunch of my boots on the gravel, the only sound under a sky littered with an impossible number of stars. Everything was normal. The chain link fence was secure. The dishes were all pointing in their pre-programmed directions, giant metal flowers waiting for whispers from the cosmos. Back inside, I settled into the worn office chair, opened my laptop, and tried to write. The words weren't coming. The silence felt heavier tonight, more oppressive. Around 1 a.m., the first odd thing happened. A single sharp ping echoed from the main server rack. It wasn't the standard alert tone, which was a soft, melodic chime. This was a high-frequency, piercing sound, like a striking tuning fork. I looked up at the monitor wall. All systems green. No alerts, no warnings. The network activity graph was a flat green line. I muted my laptop's audio, thinking it might have come from my own machine. I waited. The silence returned, now filled with my own heightened awareness. The hum of the server seemed louder. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. I shrugged it off as a fluke, maybe a capacitor blowing on a server board. It happens. Then it happened again. Ping. Same sound. Same unnerving clarity. This time, I got up and walked over to the server rack itself, a monolithic black cabinet at the far end of the room. I put my ear to the metal grill. The only sound was the whir of dozens of tiny fans. My heart was starting to beat a little faster. This was a place of absolute routine. Deviations, no matter how small, felt significant. It was like finding a new crater on the moon. I ran a manual diagnostic from the main terminal. The system scanned every dish, every receiver, every line of code. After 5 minutes, the result came back. System nominal. Everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. I decided to call it in, not because I thought there was a real problem, but because my job was to report anomalies, and this was definitely an anomaly.
I picked up the dedicated line to the Flagstaff control center. It was supposed to connect instantly. Instead of a dial tone, I heard static. Not the gentle hiss of a bad connection, but a loud, aggressive crackle, punctuated by a faint rhythmic pulse, like a slow, distorted heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. "Flagstaff, this is Blackrock. Do you copy?" I said, my voice sounding thin against the noise. The static roared back. The rhythmic pulse continued, unwavering. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. I checked the comms panel. The satellite link indicator was a steady green. The system reported a perfect connection, yet all I could get was that hostile static and the slow, deep beat. For the first time in 6 months, I felt a knot of genuine fear tighten in my stomach. The observatory was designed with triple redundancy. If the satellite link failed, a backup landline was supposed to kick in. If that failed, a cellular link would activate. None of it was working. I was cut off. My gaze drifted to the security camera monitors, 12 screens showing different angles of the array and the perimeter fence, all in grainy, infrared night vision. The wind was picking up, shaking the camera mounted on the comms tower, making the image jitter. I watched the screens, looking for anything out of place, headlights on the access road, an animal near the fence. There was nothing but the swaying metal of the dishes and the desert scrub vibrating in the wind. Then I saw it, or rather, I heard it through the door I'd left ajar, a low hum. It was different from the server hum, deeper, resonant, with a strange vibrato. It sounded like a massive engine idling, far away but still powerful enough to feel as a faint tremor in the concrete floor. I killed the lights in the control room, plunging the space into near-total darkness, save for the glow of the monitors. I crept to the door and peered through the crack. The moon was hidden by the advancing clouds, but the starlight still gave a faint, ghostly illumination to the landscape.
The humming was louder out here. It seemed to be coming from the direction of Dish 12, about 100 yards to the north, but there was nothing there. Just the immense 82-foot dish, tilted toward the sky like a giant listening ear. The hum was so deep, it felt like it was inside my own chest. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It felt organic, and it was getting louder. I scanned the area around the dish, my eyes straining in the dim light, and I saw something. A flicker of movement at the base of the dish's massive concrete pedestal. It was too small to be a person, too fluid to be an animal. It looked like a patch of darkness that was somehow darker than the surrounding shadows. It coalesced, then dissipated, like smoke or heat haze. I blinked, and it was gone. The humming stopped. The abrupt silence was more jarring than the noise it replaced. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I backed away from the door and slammed it shut, throwing the heavy deadbolt. The solid thud of the bolt locking into place was a small comfort. For the first time, I wished the bunker didn't have a door at all. I spent the next hour glued to the security monitors, my coffee forgotten, my novel a distant memory. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. The humming could have been seismic activity, a low-frequency earthquake. The static on the phone lines could be atmospheric interference from the incoming storm. The shadow I saw, a trick of the light, my sleep-deprived brain playing games with me. It was all plausible, but I didn't believe it, not for a second. The feeling in the air was different. The silence had a predatory quality now. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 a.m. The storm had arrived. The wind howled outside, and I could hear grains of sand and grit peppering the steel door. It was a relief in a way. The natural, chaotic noise of the storm was better than the focused, unnatural silence that had preceded it. I felt a little of the tension ease from my shoulders. It was just a weird night. I'd write it up in my report and the day shift engineers could figure it out. That's when the main power went out. The hum of the servers died. The overhead lights shut off. The monitors all went black. The entire building was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness and silence. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. The facility had a primary grid connection, a backup generator, and a tertiary battery system powerful enough to run the control room for 72 hours. All three had just failed simultaneously. The emergency protocol for a total power failure was clear. Stay in the control room, do not go outside, and wait for the system to reboot. A manual reboot sequence should have kicked in after 60 seconds. I sat in the dark, counting the seconds, my ears straining against a silence so profound it felt like I'd gone deaf. 1 minute passed, then 2. Nothing. The darkness was total. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. I fumbled in my jacket for my phone, its screen a blinding beacon in the oppressive black. I switched on the flashlight, its beam cutting a nervous, shaky tunnel through the room. The server racks were inert. The comms panel was dead. The building was a tomb. I felt a surge of panic, a primal fear of being trapped. The control room, my concrete sanctuary, now felt like a coffin. Then I heard a new sound, a soft, rhythmic scraping. It was coming from the roof. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the flat, gravel-topped roof. My blood went cold. The roof was 15 feet up a sheer concrete wall. There were no access ladders on the outside. Nothing could be up there. I stood frozen, phone shaking in my hand, listening to the methodical, impossible sound above my head. It moved slowly from one end of the building to the other, then stopped directly over the spot where I was standing. Silence.
For a full minute, there was nothing but the distant howl of the wind. I held my breath, waiting. And then, a single, deliberate tap echoed through the ceiling. It wasn't the sound of the storm. It was clear, distinct, and intentional. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone knocking on a door, but it was coming from the roof. I aimed my phone's flashlight at the ceiling, as if the light could somehow penetrate 2 feet of solid concrete and steel. The tapping stopped. A low, guttural hiss breathed through the vents. It sounded like the static on the phone line, but this time it wasn't coming from a speaker. It was in the room with me. I bolted. There was no thought, no decision, just pure animal instinct. I scrambled for the door, my hands fumbling with the deadbolt in the dark. The scraping on the roof started again, faster this time, frantic. The hissing from the vents grew louder, taking on a multi-toned, layered quality, like dozens of voices whispering at once. I finally managed to throw the bolt, wrenched the heavy door open, and plunged out into the screaming chaos of the sandstorm. The wind hit me like a solid wall, stealing my breath and scouring my face with sand. It was impossible to see more than a few feet. The air was a thick, brown whirlwind. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that building. I stumbled away from the bunker, my only light the weak, flickering beam of my phone, which was quickly being coated in a layer of fine dust. I needed to get to my truck. It was my only way out. I tried to remember where I'd parked it, about 50 yards from the control building, near the main gate. I staggered in what I hoped was the right direction, leaning into the wind, my head down, my arm up to shield my eyes. The sound from the vents was gone, replaced by the roar of the storm. But I didn't feel alone. The sense of a predatory presence was stronger than ever. I felt like I was being herded.
Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet changed. The crunch of gravel was replaced by the soft, yielding feel of open desert sand. I had gone the wrong way. I was wandering into the dish array. I stopped, trying to get my bearings, turning in a slow circle. The world was a maelstrom of sand and noise, and through the roar, I heard it again. That deep, resonant hum. It wasn't coming from a single direction anymore. It was coming from everywhere at once. The very air itself seemed to be vibrating with it. I spun around and saw one of the dishes, a monstrous black silhouette against the churning brown sky. Dish 7. It was supposed to be locked in position, pointed at a specific patch of sky. It was moving. The massive 100-ton structure was slowly, silently tilting downwards, its vast, concave face turning to aim directly at me. Then the dish next to it, dish 8, began to move, then dish 9. All around me, the giant metal flowers were closing, their huge forms rotating on their pedestals with an eerie, silent grace, all of them turning to focus on the spot where I stood. There was no power. They couldn't be moving. It was impossible. My mind buckled, unable to process what my eyes were seeing. The humming intensified, the frequency rising until it was a skull-rattling drone that made my teeth ache. I dropped my phone, and its light was instantly swallowed by the storm. I was in the dark again, but now I was surrounded, trapped in the center of this silent, impossible convergence. A brilliant blue-white light erupted from the center of dish 7, bathing the scene in a sterile, surgical glare. It wasn't a floodlight. It was a focused, coherent beam, like a massive laser. In the stark, actinic light, I saw the other dishes, all 35 of them, aimed at me like the barrels of colossal guns. And in the center of each dish, a similar point of light was beginning to form. I was standing in the focal point of the entire array. The humming built to an unbearable crescendo, and I felt a strange, tingling sensation all over my skin, like a powerful static charge.
I raised my hands to my face, not to shield my eyes, but in a useless, primal gesture of surrender. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound was consumed by the overwhelming noise. The last thing I saw before the other 35 beams of light converged on me was a shape, a fleeting, man-shaped silhouette of pure blackness, standing directly in the path of the beam from Dish 7, utterly unaffected by the energy pulsing through it. It wasn't a shadow, it was an absence, and it was looking right at me. They found me at dawn. My replacement, a cheerful, retired engineer named Frank, found me huddled in the driver's seat of my Forerunner, which was parked exactly where I'd left it. The doors were locked, the engine was cold. He said I didn't respond when he knocked on the window, just stared straight ahead with wide, vacant eyes. They had to break the passenger side window to get me out. I have no memory of getting to my truck. The last thing I remember is the light, the noise, and that impossible black silhouette. I woke up in a hospital in Reno, my skin lobster red, as if I'd had a severe sunburn. The doctors called it superficial thermal burns, consistent with high-intensity microwave exposure. My clothes, especially my jacket, were brittle as if they'd been flash-heated. My phone was found half buried in the sand about 20 feet from where they said I was parked, its battery dead, its internal components fused into a Sauerland. The official report from the observatory was concise. A rare, high-altitude atmospheric phenomenon, a type of lightning strike, had caused a cascading power failure and a massive electromagnetic pulse. The pulse had fried the comms, overloaded the power grid, and caused my burns. The movement of the dishes was attributed to a complete failure of their hydraulic braking systems, causing them to drift in the high winds. The sounds I heard were chalked up to auditory pareidolia, the brain creating patterns out of random noise, exacerbated by stress and isolation.
The figure I saw was not mentioned. I never went back. I quit the job the same day I was released from the hospital. I moved back to the city, got a boring office job, and surrounded myself with people and noise. But I can't escape it. Sometimes, when it's too quiet, I can still feel that hum in the back of my teeth. I have nightmares about the silent turning dishes and the all-consuming light. The investigators from the company were very thorough. They interviewed me for hours. They were polite, professional, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They kept asking if I had been drinking, if I had taken any medication. They showed me the final incident report. It was neat, logical, and explained everything away. But there was one detail they couldn't explain, a detail they left out of the official summary. Frank, my replacement, had found something during his initial sweep of the facility after I was taken away. There, at the base of the concrete pedestal for Dish 7, was a set of footprints in the undisturbed sand. They were barefoot, and each print was perfectly coated in a thin, black, vitreous substance, as if the sand had been melted into glass right where the foot had pressed down. They took samples, of course, but they never told me what they found. I know what I saw. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a system malfunction. Something was out there. Something was listening. And for one terrifying night, it decided to talk back.